Okay. Good local time, everyone. It's 8 a.m. here, but I'm sure wherever you are, you're very welcome to this official UN Sustainable Development or UN Summit of the Future virtual side event. And our focus is going to be on public-private partnerships for what we call SDG capacity building and training. So this is actually the lead in this virtual side event is University College Dublin, because we've consulted a status with EconSoc, but also we're an SDG champion of the Irish government. So where stakeholders, including universities for a year, champion the implementation of the goals in their own environment, but also to partner with others across, say, the private sector, government and civil society. So we're part of the SDG Week in Ireland, and we're also in the SDG Week in Europe. So welcome everyone here today, or we'll see the recording. So without, say, further ado, we have four excellent speakers, very different in some ways projects, but you'll see that they'll all, at the end, you'll see they kind of come together, whether from a government perspective or an academic or a vet perspective or private sector. There should be maybe an alignment of activities and dialogues, obviously to implement the SDGs, but also to work together in capacity building and training. And that's the general theme of today. I guess the sad news, or when you look at revision 4 for Pact for the Future, we haven't seen revision 5 yet. So public-private partnerships are only mentioned once. They are mentioned under what I would call Chapter 3, the science and technology, and it's very much about capacity building in the Global South, which is good. And you will see this in our presentations as well, that yes, we're doing this type of degrees and training and cooperation, but at the end of the day, we have to be open to building capacity in the Global South as well, because that's one of the main functions of what we do. So starting off, I'd like to introduce, most of you know him, Professor Enda Murphy. He's a professor of planning and environmental policy in University College Dublin. So amongst many things, he's director for the Masters in Regional Urban Planning in UCD. He also, with me, runs the Masters in Sustainable Development online in partnership with the SDG Academy, so he chairs that program. He's on the editorial board of Plus One, which is one of the world's leading science journals, and he's also on the board of, or the advisory board, or what we call the high-level advisory council for the SDG Academy. So he has many other accolades, but I'll hand it over to you, Enda, to do our first presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. I'm delighted to be here, and thanks for the invite for this event. So I'll quickly share my screen and just ask you all if you can see that okay. Yeah. Okay, so today I'm going to be speaking on a little bit on...
And we can't see your screen. Oh, well, you're spotlighted, but if you're sharing the slides, we can't see it yet.
I am sharing the slides, yeah.
We can't see it.
Okay. You can't see any of the slides?
Nope.
Paul, you have the slides as well, if you want to try.
Yeah, well, I'd have to fish them out, let's see.
But I am sharing my screen. Let me try once more. Okay, can you see that now? Is that working?
Yep, we can see them. It's just if you could put it into present. Yep, there we go. All set.
See it now. Okay, apologies. I'll have to move more quickly now. Thank you all for being here, and apologies for that hiccup at the beginning. My name is Professor Enda Murphy from University College Dublin, and as Paul says, I'm going to discuss today a little bit of a discussion on academic micro-credentials, and particularly the role of micro-credentials in pursuing, I suppose, and fulfilling the role of education for sustainable development under the 2030 agenda and for achieving the SDGs. For those of you who don't really know much about micro-credentials, I'll give you a little bit of context for them. And I suppose the key context for the micro-credentials is that there's now, I suppose, a growing recognition among major multilateral organizations, including the European Commission, for example, that people will need to update and improve their knowledge, skills, and range of competencies to fulfill sort of gaps that we have in formal education and training, but also to fulfill the needs and requirements of a fast-changing society and labour market. So one of the things that we're seeing, I suppose, over the last 5 or 10 years is that we have seen, I suppose, a minor labour market rupture in that the transition to the green economy, the transition to a digital economy has led to skills shortages in these particular areas. And I suppose the formal education market has been a bit slow to catch up, and therefore we have seen significant skill shortages in the labour market as a result of that. And in fact, according to the OECD's Skills for Jobs database, about 80 million workers in Europe have skills that are mismatched with their jobs. On the other hand, about 40% of employers seem to have difficulties fulfilling positions due to a lack of required skills that they feel they need. So I think that, given these sort of dichotomies and these sort of gaps that we have in knowledge and skills and so on, we will, I suppose, need to rethink a little bit. And in academia, we need to rethink a bit about how we deliver education in a more dynamic way. And I suppose that is a bit where micro-credentials come in. The context for them, the further context is that micro-credentials really are a response to the fact that conventional study programs are arguably, at least, not that well suited to providing for, I suppose, accelerated demand for specific skill sets in the green digital economies, and also for sustainability and sustainability jobs. But also they're not dynamic enough, conventional study programs, because they tend to take quite long periods of time. And they're also not attuned, I suppose, as well to lifelong learning, and the fact that much of the upskilling that we have to do, for example, in the area of sustainability, the green economy, digitalization, so on, will actually have to occur through lifelong learning, as opposed to the typical formal education system in the earlier years. And HEI processes, higher education processes, really can't seem to keep up that well with these increasingly nuanced combinations of changing expectations posed not only by students, but also by the demands of the workplace. And micro-credentials do have the potential to respond to this more dynamic landscape of labour market rupture, but also of the societal imperative in the area of sustainability to train more people in education for sustainable development, and also in sustainability skills more generally, right across the 17 SDGs. And this has been recognised. I suppose the role and potential of micro-credentials have been recognised under major European documents such as the European Pillar of Social Rights, but also under the European Council's proposal recommendation on the approach for micro-credentials for lifelong learning back in 21-22. And so there is a recognition that micro-credentials, I suppose, at the institutional level will play an important role into the future. For those of you who don't know what they are, micro-credentials are designed to be flexible and part-time programs of study. Some of them are delivered online. Some take a blended approach with a little bit of online, a little bit of in-person. But really, they're supposed to fit in with the demands of everyday living, and also to fit in with the demands of busy lives, particularly for people who are already in work and who are upskilling through the workplace. And because of that, the content tends to be broken down into a series of sort of sessions or smaller units, grouping, I suppose, chunks of relevant learning together so that they're more digestible and more efficient for the learner to absorb over typically a longer period of time. And so micro-credentials under the European credit transfer system can range from anything from about 5 to 30 credits typically. But what their value is, I suppose, that they allow students and people in employment who become mature students to assemble portfolios of learning, to upskill across institutions and piece together different competencies and areas of knowledge to make up new qualifications that can align with labour market needs and employer requirements as well. And I suppose the crucial thing about micro-credentials is that they tend also to be stackable. and that's very, very important. So they're stackable, they're integrated, they allow you to pursue potentially bigger educational objectives such as a master's, but through smaller stackable programs of learning that help you build towards a bigger goal in an educational qualification. We might then ask the question, what's good micro-credentials? Because micro-credentials can be provided through the formal and informal education systems and the semi-formal education systems, but typically they're good criteria associated with them is that they're quality assured from established universities or equivalent educational providers. They're flexible, they're part-time, they're associated with hybrid delivery, they fit into busy lifestyles. They're accredited and they provide learners with ECTS in the European context, so that they provide the people who are taking these credentials worldwide recognition for their learning and achievements in education. They're also typically designed by academics, so they're grounded in research and scientific state of the art, and they also tend to be delivered, I suppose, by experts in the field. And the idea also is that their content and their focus in terms of the topics tend to be in line with skills demand in the labour market, but also with societal need. And this is also really important for sustainability. So the micro-credentials can be much more focused than typical longer structured programs, perhaps. A little bit of a case study in this regard is from my own university, University College Dublin. And we started to try and, I suppose, build out micro-credentials in the last couple of years. And one of the ways that we've done this is that we've worked in partnership with the SDG Academy, which is the educational arm, I suppose, of UNSDSN. And the Educational Academy is some really amazing and very, very high quality MOOCs, massive open online courses. And what we've tried to do is work with them in University College Dublin in partnership to try and produce a master's pathway in foundations of sustainable development. So to fulfill that potential need for sustainability skills in the workplace. It's very much a joint initiative between SDG Academy, between University College Dublin, and it's a partnership. And I think that's very, very important. It's a partnership between the formal education sector and the semi-formal education sector. And what we do is essentially we utilize some of the SDG Academy MOOCs and material, we build them into our master's programs and our professional micro-credentials programs within UCD. And that way students are allowed to work towards a master's pathway in sustainable development. This is a good example, just very quickly, of what we're doing on the micro-credentials end. So for example, students can essentially start off small when thinking about working towards a master's. So they can complete the SDG Academy Foundations of Sustainable Development program on edX. That allows them to get accepted into UCD's professional diploma, which is a level 9 NFQ National Qualification System in Ireland, professional diploma on sustainable development. So by completing the edX Academy MOOCs on Foundations of Sustainable Development, along with the UCD's Global Classroom, which is also taught, I suppose, online, they're able to then gain a professional diploma of 20 credits and receive that professional diploma from UCD, and then utilize that if they want to go further to begin a master's in sustainable development and have 20 credits taken off their 90 credit program in the Masters of Sustainable Development. So the idea is that you allow people in employment, mature students, people who have very busy lifestyles, to work towards a master's using the professional diploma option. They can also stop the professional diploma option. They work towards a master's, and in that way they're upskilling. It's hybrid, it's online delivery. Everything is easily accessible for the students, and it also encourages diversity, I suppose, because we have students all around the world by virtue of the fact that the program is online and in partnership with SDG Academy. So this is an example of how micro-credentials can work in practice. And very quickly, I suppose, we also can't forget, I suppose, that when we think about micro-credentials is that relevant public authorities do struggle with them. They're not always perfect. So public authorities do struggle in managing the various providers of micro-credentials. And so developing definitions and building connections to national qualification systems and European qualification systems, the quality assurance standards, is very, very, very important. And while micro-credentials are very, very important for the future, we need to make sure that they're quality assured. And I think doing this, working through universities and partnerships with other sectors is a good way to do this. So despite all this, micro-credentials are a very important means of implementation, I suppose, for achieving education for sustainable development by 2030. And I think we're going to see much more of this in the future. We're already seeing a lot of it, particularly in the sustainability area. Thank you very much. Apologies if I...
Thanks. Thank you, Enda. So, yeah, so the big thing, of course, with the micro-credentials is that they're interoperable with the university, but also potentially they should be interoperable with what professional authorities are doing, or maybe even, like, so for example, the Government of Ireland takes the cert and has it as part of CPD for teachers in training in Ireland. So they have a nice way to upskill as part of their HR run, but simultaneously creates a pathway into university to do further work. So this interoperability of the micro-credential, which the VET, the government, the professional bodies and universities is really what we're kind of going for, because that brings all the training entities together and get them. But the universities offer what you say is that important accreditation and alignment and rigor on credentials, which is very important. So our next speaker is Isabella Carroza. She's a program associate at the SDG Academy, and she works mainly on lots of things, but on transitional skills for the built environment, and this is what I'm going to talk about today. Previously, she worked in the OECD in DEFCON, and she came to us last year. So she's the first person in our Paris office that's worked for the SDG Academy. And she holds an MSc in International Affairs from the Graduate Institute of Geneva. So you have the floor, Isabella.
Hi, everyone. Really nice to be here. Ellen, if you could please share my slides. Thank you. So to kickstart this presentation, I'd like to introduce the U project that the SDG Academy is proud to be part of, which is the BuildSkills Academy, which aims to support the construction sector to achieve the green and digital transitions. This presentation will detail the project approach and the steps we are taking to support this transformation. Next slide, please. So what are the major challenges for the construction sector? The construction sector in Europe faces major challenges. Firstly, it has significant environmental, social, and economic impact, but struggles with notable workforce shortage and the need to attract young, skilled professionals. To address this, there's an urgent need for reskilling and upskilling through lifelong learning programs, such as vocational education and training. Additionally, the sector must bridge gaps in green and digital skills to keep pace with industry transitions. We're also seeing a decline in employment for medium and low skilled roles, with a 10% drop since 2009 and another 10% decline expected by 2035. Meanwhile, there's a growing demand for highly skilled roles, particularly in engineering, electrical work, business and construction management, as the industry shifts towards more advanced and innovative activities. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So the BuildSkills Academy aims to tackle this key challenge in the construction sector by building strong partnerships at both local and transnational levels between vocational education and training communities and businesses. Our goal is to revolutionize the industry by addressing the twin transition challenge of digital and green transformations. The objective is to offer training that aligns with real labor market's demands through a lifelong learning approach, including reskilling and upskilling. A key goal is to develop a pan-European certification framework for recognize and validate transitional skills and competencies across the EU, which will also bridge certification gaps between member states. Additionally, we aim to integrate essential transactional skills into existing VET programs and establish centers of vocational excellence with robust quality assurance mechanisms to maintain high standards and relevance. Our efforts will benefit VET centers, educational institutions, industry professionals, policymakers, and trainees by ensuring that they are equipped with the skills needed for the future. Next slide, please. So the BuildSkills Academy has outlined several critical topic areas for the construction sector, meaning the most urgent areas where there is a need for upskilling and reskilling. We have the five of them. The first one is achieving net zero carbon emissions. The second one was on climate resilience and adaptation. the third on implementing circular economy practice, the fourth on utilizing sustainable materials and sourcing, and the fifth one on occupant health and well-being. Each of these areas is crucial for advanced sustainability and resilience in the construction sector, and each of them has been identified with how many skills are needed to upskill, reskill, to make this sector to adapt to the green and digital transition. Next slide, please. So the BuildSkills methodology is also aligned with the European Quality Assurance and Vocational Education Training. The ECVET approach for building rich skills methodology aims to support several key objectives. Firstly, it focuses on anticipating skills needed in the construction industry by facilitating collaborative design and encouraging active feedback from stakeholders, including educational institutions, enterprise, and suppliers involved in building innovation. This collaborative approach is crucial within the VET development framework in Europe. Secondly, the initiative supports growth opportunities for individuals and businesses, enhancing learning, updating emerging skills, and fostering competitiveness within the sector. And lastly, it aims to improve the quality of the VET system by updating training programs to keep pace with technological advancements and align with the EU Green Deal and the new European Bowels Challenge. This approach ensures that the VET system remains relevant and effective in addressing the evolving needs of the construction sector. Next slide, please. So to address the challenge of the quality assurance, the Build and Enrich the Skills focus on developing an ECVET compliant system for the creation, delivery, and certification of training programs. This involves setting quality criteria applicable to all project partners and VET providers across different countries, and identifying commonalities in quality approaches. We must ensure that the Build and Enrich the Skills methodologies adheres to ECVET standards. And additionally, we need to outline the conditions that a course must meet to be classified as enriched and aligned with principle of professional excellence. To support this, a self-assessment methodology will be created, allowing each VET provider to evaluate their adherence to the VET quality framework. These steps are crucial for maintaining high standards and ensure the effectiveness of our training programs. Next slide, please. And I also like to tell a bit more how the process of the BuildSkills Academy works, and it involves several key steps. The steps 1 to 3 have already been completed. First, we identify the skills, competencies, and knowledge needed for specific occupations using the ESCO framework. Next, we create a matrix of transitional skills and competencies incorporating market needs for reskilling and upskilling. And third, a strong quality assurance mechanism was established to comply with the ECVET framework. At the moment, we are currently designing the Build and Enrich Skills methodology to enhance the relevance of labor market skills in VET courses. Then we will integrate these missing skills into existing VET courses, enriching them with transitional skills. This is where we'll have thematic groups with different stakeholders. Next, a certification scheme will be developed for curricula, training materials, and individuals based on ISO 17024 standards. And the process will also include pilot test VET course in 6 countries, conducting 3 master classes, and cross-reference results across different partner countries and axes. And finally, we'll move to the evaluation of our outcomes using quantitative indicators from the ECVET framework and provide feedback to VET providers for continuous improvement. It's a long process that will last for more or less 2 years. And really happy to present this project for you. Next slide, please. And if you have any questions, Maria Nakova is currently the manager behind this whole project. You can also access our website, our Facebook, and LinkedIn to learn more about our tasks and everything that is going on with the BuildSkills Academy. Thank you.
That's excellent, Isabella. Yeah, so I guess the dream at the end of the project, and we will have a session in the European Parliament or the European Commission and vet providers and also the academy or academics, is that this certification on these particular green and digital skills should be European wide. and adapted at national level and should be interoperable with academic runs as well. And this way, we can actually help the course providers to have a kind of a playbook or a toolkit to actually transform their courses and make sure the professional bodies and the certification recognize these new transformations, or are putting in basically green and digital skill competencies. So that's an ambitious project because there is resistance to any sort of European certification. But I just think on the digital, on these transformational skills, I think we have some chance. So without further ado, I move on to our next presentation. So this is Dr. Elena Proden. She's a development economist. She's the lead on the strategic implementation of the 2030 agenda in UNITAR. And she's also coordinating the UN SDG Learn partnership to basically work with stakeholders, including policymakers, statisticians, businesses, academia, CSOs, to work together on potentially upskilling and reskilling on the SDGs. So I give the floor to Elena.
Yes, so it's my pleasure to be here with you today. I'm going to speak a little bit, I think, about a broader concept. We've had some excellent presentations on things that they're already in the pipeline, and micro-credentials, you know, how to sort of really offer meaningful learning to the private sector, for example, in the construction sector through public-private collaborations. And my presentation will be about a concept that we've been developing together with UNIDO, United Nations Industrial Development Organization, Sustainable Development Solutions Network, and my entity, United Nations Institute for Training and Research, to provide to sort of, on the one hand, a more conceptual underpinning to these efforts and then connect the dots. And I will explain that in a second. Paul has mentioned that I'm coordinating on behalf of UNITAR, United Nations UN SDG partnership that brings together more than 60 UN agencies, but also other organizations, including, for example, SDSN, think tanks, also several universities. And what we've been trying to do, in fact, we set up a couple of years ago SDG for Business Task Force, discussing what are the needs, in fact, of the private sector, how can we work together also to support better the transitions towards sustainability, inclusion, SDGs within the private sector. And we've seen that, of course, there were examples of large companies, multinationals that have started working on sustainability transitions early on, incorporating sustainability strategies, etc. But one thing that our partners have been saying that there are much less opportunities for small and medium-sized companies, and this is where we could work together also to see how to support, you know, the building of capacities within SMEs for these type of transformations. And this idea of the capabilities for the Future Hub has been born out of these discussions, and the idea that there are a lot of partners who have a lot of either already existing learning materials to offer, or who have the expertise and would like to collaborate with the others to be able to offer relevant and meaningful learning for the private sector, SMEs in different industries. And we've been thinking, how could we do this together? And so essentially, I guess it really builds on this idea that on the one hand, the role of public sector would be important, industrial policies are very important. And in fact, we will be presenting this concept at the upcoming 2024 Multilateral Industrial Policy Forum this year. So that's one idea, you know, that you do need to have public sector interventions to correct market inefficiencies and to work closely with the private sector, recognizing the expertise that the private sector can bring. And on the other hand, also the idea that it should not be happening only at the national level. Each country doing it on its own, but in fact there is a need for this coordination of industrial policies across countries, within regions, etc. There was also a report published this year by UNIDO called New Age of Industrial Policy, or where they call for a new age of industrial policy. And they've highlighted a couple of things that are essential also to the concept that we've developed. Firstly, that industrial policies should be having SDGs as their mission. Secondly, that they should be forward-looking. Also, they should be accounting for the mega trends that are happening in terms of technological, demographic transitions, climate change, etc. Thirdly, that they should be really about collaborations, public-private sector collaborations, recognizing that on the one hand, in fact, markets and private sector, they fell short of promoting knowledge sharing. So that's a big disadvantage, and public sector can support that. And on the other hand, that private sector also is extremely important in promoting innovation, you know, that public sector may be failing in identifying these future competitive advantages, the new technological sectors emerging. And then finally, the last point, it's really about collaboration across countries. And here it's essentially about understanding the importance of regional coordination, for example, some kind of supranational regulation, but also understanding that changes in industrial policy in one large economy would have significant consequences outside of the borders of this country or region. If you take the example, for example, of EU Corporate Sustainability Reporting Initiative, there will be significant consequences also, for example, for many SMEs participating in value chains outside of the European region and in EU. And so how do these companies who may have less of capacities and resources to adjust, and many of them are concerned about the potential shift of the burden in terms of reporting, how on the one hand do they deal with this? How can their capacities be strengthened through our partnership and collaboration to offer more training and learning opportunities? And how can they also harness new opportunities that may be emerging as green industrial policies being introduced, economic transformations are happening, and potentially new green and inclusive value chains are being formed? So these are really the ideas behind. And there has been a lot of literature on the importance of learning in industrial policies and also knowledge generation as a result of interactions across key institutions. And these are some of the stakeholders we've been thinking of for this hub: business firms, public training and research institutions, communities of practice, technical societies, you know, involved in the standard setting, etc. And again, the role of public investment in supporting this initiative and multilateral cooperation to make sure that it's available not only to the companies within the national borders and young people, for example, future employers or current employers. How do you sort of enable those who have less resources in countries, for example, least developed countries, etc., to benefit from these opportunities? And we've been thinking about this support on the capabilities along the lines of how do you support countries more specifically on building collective competencies and individual competencies, and along the lines of what kind of learning strategies these countries may be thinking about, And what we came up with is sort of here, this is a visual presentation, you know, how do we connect the dots? How do we connect these stakeholders, industrial authorities, vocational education and training institutions, higher education institutions, business and SMEs within countries, but also between countries, across regions and globally. And also the second idea, it's really about this expertise and learning that is already available or it's in the pipeline. How do we sort of make it easily available in a meaningful way so that learners could have relevant and flexible learning pathways? The example of micro-credentials is extremely relevant here. You know, how do you, can you bring these stakeholders to actually offer these pathways? And also make them available to those with less resources. And so essentially, we hope that this hub will offer opportunities for learning for policymakers, foundational learning to transform sort of social beliefs that more at the meso level, you know, how do we sort of support these vision, collaboration changes that are required, how to also make access to quality and industry-specific learning relevant learning available for SMEs, VATs, etc. And then finally, how do you leverage knowledge sharing across the networks of these institutions? So this is the idea, and I will stop here.
Okay, thank you, Elena. So that's excellent. No, I think it's going to be like, I think one of the main philosophies behind Multilateral Industrial Policy Forum, or one of the main reasons of coordinating industrial policies is that, you know, countries can't be using industrial policy to race to the bottom on taxes, but also, you know, trying to get onto global value chains by having less stringent social and environmental laws. So it's actually very important that we all industrial authorities, the government, buy into the idea that they want to green and make global supply chains more inclusive and sustainable. So that does need coordination across countries, and it needs capacity building and upskilling. But actually, it's a future that nobody has seen yet. So it's very important to actually discuss this and create it and have education programs with the private sector and the SMEs all along the supply chain. So we don't have unanticipated policy. So we want coordinated and simple policy, and that it does the least damage to the companies and people who are involved on the supply chains. But obviously we want to green and make the supply chains inclusive. So we'll be looking forward to this Multilateral Industrial Policy Forum, and we'll see the supports we get from the countries, the private sector, the vets, the academics, and we'll see what, we already have lots of material to put in that hub, but it'd be interesting to see how they sign up to it. Least but not what the most important, let's say, is we do have Melissa Littner from Swiss Re. So this is a private sector voice. So she's head of sustainability for Swiss Re's life and health reinsurance business. And she leads the development of a global growth strategy in inclusive insurance for Swiss Re and also its insuring clients. Melissa is also a fellow of the Actuarial Science Society of South Africa and a fellow of the Institute and the Faculty of Actuaries in the UK. We all know this is one of the, in UCD anyway, this is one of the toughest degrees, the actuarial science, and we're all a little bit of intimidated with anyone with that background. So, so that's really interesting. But yesterday we had we presented, Melissa will talk about other things, but and I think Lorcan Hall is in the room here as well, who's taking the lead for the SDG Academy, but we are going to be having we've been launching and pre-launching and lots of different events on this position paper with the, you know, the reinsurance and the SDGs. There is a good, we've been hearing lots of reach out to the private sector, to be honest, both at our board saying we have to do more, we have to find a way to do this. And I guess even in the presentations today, when we're thinking about the micro-credentials and the vet colleges and even this initiative from governments, like what's the plug-in here? How do we actually get the plug-in so that the HR run, let's say, of corporates who are upskilling and reskilling as well, feel very comfortable working and aligning with governments and university and vet colleges so that everyone is getting the maximum sort of training, but the right training for resilience in the labour force and also for planet and people in general. So I'll hand the floor to you.
Thanks very much, Paul, and thanks for the invitation to speak. I'm going to buck the trend a little bit and speak without any slides. And as Paul mentioned, I'm going to be bringing very much a private sector perspective. I'm not going to take for granted that the insurance and reinsurance industry is well understood, so I'll give a little bit of context to what a reinsurer actually is first, and then I'll segue into the paper that Paul just referenced and how that links into capacity building and skills development. So to start with the company that I work for, Swiss Re, I wouldn't be surprised if you haven't heard of them. We do hide behind the scenes a little bit, but are exceptionally influential. Swiss Re is the world's oldest and second biggest reinsurance company. And if you're not familiar with what a reinsurer does, then the simplest way to understand a reinsurer is that effectively we provide insurance to insurance companies. So we sit quite far back in the value chain, but that perspective is really broad and really influential in terms of influencing the resilience and strength of economies as a result of the risk transfer solutions that we are able to support together with the clients that we serve. Now, if you look at the whole insurance and reinsurance industry, at its very core, its raison d'etre, or its core purpose, is societal resilience. And that ties very closely, of course, with sustainable development. At Swiss Re specifically, our group vision statement is "We make the world more resilient." And that's a statement that every employee who works with Swiss Re connects to very, very strongly in the work that we do. Specifically looking at sustainable development and the SDGs, aiming for peace and prosperity for people and planet, really insurance and reinsurance has a lot of value to add on the sustainable development agenda. Effectively, what insurance does is it helps the world to tolerate risk. And when risk can be tolerated, then it means that innovation and growth can more easily be enabled. Effectively, insurers and reinsurers act as a shock absorber for crises that happen, and we help the world to recover faster from shocks that may otherwise cause progress to reverse or decline. Now, shocks such as climate-related ones, natural disasters, even man-made disasters, those are rather well known and can be well appreciated. But insurance has a lot to do as well for shocks related to health or preventing poverty, and shocks related to the way that the economy performs as well. Looking then at the sustainable development agenda, though, insurance, in our view, those of us who are inside the industry and working on sustainability, feels very under-recognized in development finance. So if you just look at the United Nations SDG framework and search for the word anywhere in that framework and its targets and indicators for the word insurance, you will find it exactly 1 time. More in the more present, for the Summit of the Future and the current draft of the Pact for the Future, insurance actually is mentioned not even once. Despite there being an entire chapter, 1 out of the 5 chapters in the Pact for the Future being dedicated to the topic of development finance for the SDGs. Now that really stands in contrast to another word. If you look for the word risk across the Pact for the Future, you will find it 36 times in the current draft. And risk is the fuel of the insurance industry. And so that disconnect is really quite stark and something that we really feel needs to be corrected. There's definitely missed opportunity there for the insurance and reinsurance industry to contribute more towards the impact and development that's required within the SDGs. And at the same time, we can create value for the industry as well. So what are we doing about this? And coming to the paper that Paul mentioned in the intro, Swiss Re is supporting the Sustainable Development Solutions Network to do a piece of research and publish a position paper that's trying to understand why this gap exists and make recommendations to address it. Effectively, the question we are trying to answer is, why isn't insurance on the agenda, and what needs to be done to make it more prominent? We're drawing on the views and experience of about 30 very high-profile public and private sector insurance leaders. And I'll give you a little bit of a flavor of some of the recommendations that are coming out of that soon-to-be-published report. So firstly, one of the recommendations that we will be making is on the topic that we need to really broaden the understanding of sustainable development beyond simply equating it with climate adaptation and climate mitigation. The area of sustainable development really encompasses so many social related issues for which the insurance sector has a big role to play. And too often sustainability and climate change are considered to be equal, and they are really not. They are of course overlapping, but sustainable development is far broader than just the climate topic. Secondly, we feel that a reframing is needed for the sustainable development agenda to be reframed a little bit more positively into one around transformation, innovation, and value creation. And that'll be particularly meaningful for the private sector because it will attract more interest from the private sector to become involved and contribute towards the challenges that are there. They are not simply challenges, they are not simply negative, but they present tremendous opportunity as well. Thirdly, we're going to be calling for a shift from solutions that are more reactive in nature to disasters after disasters happen, and rather to adopt an approach that is around prevention is better than cure, adopting that philosophy that strategies really need to prevent the risk from happening and not just react when it does happen. And the fourth one I would highlight is very relevant to the panel discussion today, where we recognize a very critical need for capacity building and upskilling on sustainable development, so that there is broader appreciation and knowledge of what is required specifically across the insurance sector, so that those of us who work in this industry can use the skills that we have and develop the skills that we have further to be able to contribute to sustainable development. That's just a taste. There will be other recommendations made as well, so not an exhaustive list. What I can share now is a few examples from my perspectives, both working for Swiss Re and as an actuary, part of the actuarial profession in both South Africa and the UK, in terms of how I see skills and capacity building happening in those two domains. So to talk first about the actuarial profession a little bit, the insurance sector really would not function very well at all without actuaries. We are not a huge profession globally, but we are one that the insurance sector really relies on in order to make sure that the risks that we underwrite are appropriately managed financially, and the promises that we make can be upheld irrespective of what happens in the future in terms of claims. Actuaries, though, of course, do not only work in insurance, they work in broader financial services as well. So, for example, they work in investments, they work in banking, and they work in the pensions industry. Those are the usual areas where you will find actuaries working. Now, the education program that Paul referenced earlier, which actuaries follow, is generally funded by employers. The latter parts of an actuarial qualification are done simultaneously while working, and that work experience is critical towards making sure that actuaries are fully qualified and prepared to be able to do their work. The Institute of Actuaries in the UK is not the only profession. Many countries have their own professional bodies, but the Institute of Actuaries in the UK is the largest profession globally. Most of them all sit under what's called the International Actuarial Association. That's a supranational body, but the IFOA has about 30,000 members, and most of them are in the UK. but a large chunk are elsewhere in the world, such as myself. I'm in Switzerland, but there's a very large contingent, for example, in India as well, so also in emerging markets. Now, for an actuary to qualify, there is sustainability content that is slowly working its way into the actuarial syllabus, which is obviously updated from time to time. And so trainee actuaries will be exposed to that already in the early qualification days. In the last 2 to 3 years or so, the profession has also started to offer what I think could be compared to a micro-credential. It's an additional certificate in climate and sustainability risk that members can optionally choose to do should they find that relevant to their work or have personal or professional interest to do that. And that's about a 3-month program that's offered through some self-study and some virtual classroom sessions. There's also a lot of resource that is being provided in the profession, or developed in the profession, for what we call CPD, or continuing professional development. And that really relies very heavily on contributions from members and volunteer contributions from members who give their time and interest and passion to generate that content. So it comes in the form of guides, of curated reading lists and material. It comes in the form of podcasts as well. But predominantly, what those volunteer actuaries are doing is also producing novel research papers. They feed into development, as I said, but also they feed into public policy debate and the influence that the actuarial profession has on public policy as well. So hopefully from my descriptions, it's clear to you that a lot of that capacity building is very much member driven in terms of the demand, but also member driven in terms of the supply. And I think that to some degree that is something of a constraint. There is definitely scope there for more open collaboration beyond the profession as well, for how we can enhance and improve what actuaries are exposed to in terms of their development with respect to sustainability. If I look back to Swiss Re now and answer the same question on what does capacity building look like from the perspective of the company I work for and within the insurance industry, Swiss Re has internally what's called the Swiss Re Institute, so a division of the group that is focused on research and training. And I'll give you a couple of examples from each of those areas. So in the research domain, back in 2023, so last year, I contributed together with some of my colleagues towards a publication that looked into the question of inclusion in the life and health insurance industry globally. The paper is called The Inclusion Radar, if you want to look it up. It explored the topic of financial inclusion across 16 markets globally that more or less represent about half of the world's life and health insurance premium revenues. One of the findings that we explored in that paper was that the availability of life insurance between advanced and emerging countries is crucially dependent on a critical driver that is skills development within those markets. And that looks very different between a typical advanced market and emerging markets. And that really holds emerging markets back in terms of being able to develop the industry and effectively make life and health insurance solutions more available and accessible to their populations. Then in the domain of training, since 2022, the Swiss Re Institute has also offered, as one of its programs, a business case for sustainability course. So this is a virtual classroom learning program that aims itself or targets executives and other senior managers and professionals in the insurance industry who are keen to understand and learn how sustainability specifically can be applied in an insurance context. We've seen really increasing demand in that course, particularly in 2024. We've actually just completed about a week ago. The latest cohort there have come through the program. And the participants come from the private sector, clearly, the insurance clients that we serve, but they also actually increasingly come from the public sector, which is very good to see as well. Another interesting statistic is that in the last cohort that came through the program, 60% of the participants actually came from emerging markets, which really demonstrates the hunger and the need for capacity building, particularly from emerging markets again. So I'll conclude at this point, and we can switch over to questions shortly. But as a closing statement, I hope that some of these examples have helped to give you an appreciation of what skills development looks like, specifically from a private sector point of view. Within the insurance sector, how sustainability is starting to be incorporated into the training of professionals who we rely on and work in our industry. But I would also say that the problem I mentioned earlier, that our position paper, together with the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, is trying to address and explore, also requires some skills and capacity development in the opposite direction. So we also need those organizations and partners who work in sustainable development to develop a better understanding of what industries like ours, not only ours, but for example, ours, insurance, can really do to help the sustainable development agenda. And so there's a two-way need, in a sense, for skills and capacity development if we're going to be able to narrow this gap between how the public and private sector can work together. Thanks very much. Back to you, Paul.
Oh, that was really, really excellent. Yeah, so just a few thoughts were in my head was and Lorcan knows this. I've always been going back many years. I've worked on social protection, particularly when the Soviet Union collapsed, and we actually had to work quite hard to put in labor force surveys and social protection structures, etc. Because before, firms used to look after everything, and then you suddenly were out on the market and there was nobody protecting you, the rights to nothing, right? But later, even in Africa, I just found it's just horrific that, I think it's about 5.8 billion people don't really have access to a broad suite of insurance products, you know what I mean? So your life could be fine and you get an economic shock and you're gone. You just can't recover. You get a health shock, you're gone. You get a flood, environmental shock. So this is really quite, the whole idea of insurance underwriting the whole sort of ecosystems of companies and, households and governments and corporates. It's really should not be underestimated, and it is actually quite shocking that it's not really mentioned in the finance for sustainable development. The second thing that came into mind was I'm president of the Statistical Society in Ireland. We work with the actuarial guys, and I think same with Elena. She chairs the statistical capacity across the UN system as well. But actually, that's kind of interesting that you pick the discipline behind insurance, and then you should look at the professional bodies there and see how they're putting in these skill competencies and whether they'd like to align that with a micro-credential, so that there's pathways into vet colleges or universities. So that's kind of an eye-opener too. I actually never thought of that, and that's so it's what's this, the causes of causes of causes. You could just keep going back and deeper into seeing who should be trained or who drives what. But very good. I'll enjoy going back into Shane Whelan, and he's been brilliant on the actuary science program. I'm actually saying something to him that he hadn't thought about already. It would be quite good, or maybe he has. So I'm going to open up to the floor. You are unmuted, every one of you, but if you put up your hand, and I think you're not going to Zoom bomb us or something, I reckon I'll let you in to speak. We'll actually unmute you. So anyone like to question? We have some expertise in the room for sure. I'm seeing lots of different names. So just raise your hand. There's Mark. Okay, let's see. Okay, Mark, go ahead. I think you should be able
Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I had a question. This is actually a really interesting idea, given that de-risking is a major part of getting, the other industries involved in sustainable development projects. Do you see there being a large trend towards more insurance-related or de-risking products available for sustainable development in the energy space, what I'm in, Or do you see that still being a relatively untapped direction for the insurance industry to go?
I guess that was a question directed at me,
Yeah.
Mark.
Yes, I am so sorry, Melissa. Thank you.
So specifically, the energy sector is a little bit beyond my personal domain of life and health insurance. But generally, I would say the interest or the appetite from within the insurance and reinsurance industry to support the transition in the energy sector is very, very high. I can't comment too much on how well we feel we are utilized yet versus what our potential is. But if I had to hazard a guess towards that, I would expect that perhaps that utilization is not as high as it could be in general, and there's far more potential for better and more innovative partnerships to bring the private insurance sector closer to where the other funding solutions and finance solutions are coming from in order to transition the sector.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that's Mark. People should introduce themselves. Are you still Harvard Extension School and MDP Association?
Yes, I work in renewable energy, but in order to avoid irritating my wife, I'm also taking a master's program so that I can stay away from her for a bit, which reduces her stress level.
Okay, sounds good, I think. Gary?
Hi there.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thanks, Professor Walsh. Hi, everyone. Thank you for a great presentation today. I wanted to build on the presentation that Isabella shared, and specifically the ECAVET framework. Would love to get any thoughts on how we can best gather the data to assess real-time impact of public-private capacity building programs. I'm not sure if it's a qualitative, quantitative approach or combination, or if perhaps digital can help with the gathering of the information.
Thank you. So the BuildSkills Academy is it's building this enriched skills methodology, which will be an online self-assessment tool, and we'll have a mix of quantitative and qualitative methods to ensure to make sure it's complying with the ECAVET framework. So using digital tools, self-assessment questionnaires, and automated skills gap report, it will provide the real-time data on curriculum enrichment, and while tracking KPIs through a digital dashboard. So qualitative methods would include interviews, focus groups, and case studies. And this digital platform can further support proactive monitoring through real-time analytics and feedback loops, ensuring that it's aligned with the green digital skills that they need. So this is in construction yet, but it's going to be an online tool that the VT providers will be able to put their needs through this self-assessment tool and figure out how they can better enrich their courses. Not sure if I answer your question.
Oh, no, that's perfect. Thank you so much.
I guess there's a question from Anna Pandi. I've unmuted you. Do you want to ask your question, or do you want me to ask it? Can you come on? Anupan?
You can ask directly.
Yeah, go ahead. We can hear you.
I've written. You can read that.
Oh, you want me to read it? Okay. So what you say is that how can we improve the coverage of climate finance and biodiversity scenarios through exploration of AI and open science methodologies? That's actually a tough question. I'm not sure. So it's quite. Does anyone want to take that on? I guess it's to do with needing the kind of right data to underwrite risks, and how you could use AI and open science, bring in the science behind it more appropriately. So that's kind of when Jeffrey Sachs looked at this insurance paper, actually the first thing he brought up was that issue about maybe with SDGs today, because we do a lot of with ISRA in California, we do a lot of scanning of nature and maps and things that you could potentially create interesting data, and whether it be useful for underwriting. I don't know. What do you think, Melissa?
Yeah, let me try and answer. It is a tough question, and I almost want to flip it back to Anupam and say, well, how do you think AI can help?
I think he knows the answer too. Yeah.
Sounds like he had some ideas, which is great. So that's what we want. That's the innovation we want, right? But maybe if I can elaborate a little bit on the problem of scenarios, effectively because of climate risk and the way our world and how quickly our world is changing. Typically, underwriting and insurance is done looking backwards because we use past data in order to build models that we can then project into the future. The world that we're in today doesn't allow that to happen any longer. And we have to start developing models that are more forward-looking and take into account that the underlying systems are completely changing, and we cannot rely on that past data anymore to be a sound basis for underwriting. So if AI and data science and some of this, open science are some of the things that can help us to develop better models for the future without needing to rely so much on that past data, then there's definitely potential there to help in the underwriting and climate finance space.
Good. So Jadi Liss, I have you unmuted. I can read out your question if you want me to, or would you like to come on? Jadi? Okay, so just a question about the BuildSkills Academy. How exactly is it going to be delivered? Yes, is it kind of online, or so it's Isabella, like, so basically it's the methodology thing of the platform, like how do vet providers or course providers engage in upskilling their syllabus and coursework, like how exactly is going to be done? And the second bit to this was like a nice little question about the micro-credentials. They just seem very academic and vet college, but this is in the accreditation. But like, are you not building in what I call the outside school, like hands-on approaches, like how, you know, how practically you can live with people in nature? Is that kind of not part of the curriculum? And my answer would be it can be in the assessments and the projects and the way pedagogies are designed, but maybe I'll let Enda talk to that. So they're the two questions. How exactly do you get, how do vet providers engage in BuildSkills? And then maybe that's Isabella first.
Sure, thank you. So the way that VET providers engage with the BuildSkills is very, it's approach that is very, they're exchanging their main challenges with the BuildSkills Academy project. And the BuildSkills Academy project is responding in making this methodology to make sure that they are enriching their courses. So the courses will be first pilot through the VET providers that are part of the BuildSkills Academy. And then hopefully it will grow into a certification, a European-wide certification that can be applied to other VET providers throughout Europe. At first, this methodology will be online, and it's all the methodology will only enrich the courses, meaning that it will identify what are the main aspects of each courses, or which skills are missing for this profession or any type of skills. So at first it will be online as a self-assessment tool, and then it will be into a certification, European-wide certification. Yes.
Yeah, so unfortunately, there's lots of questions, but there's just one last one, and I think it's actually a kind of a good one. They're all good, of course. From Lucy, do you want to come on and ask? Or do you want me to read it? Lucy Mumby.
Yes, I was hello everyone. I'm so happy to be here. And my question was, which action is it going to be taken in order for us to be in this forum and to take part in this public-private private partnership? That was my question. Sorry.
Yeah, we'll see you take. So from my perspective, I think this is the real challenge. I know we have to do behind the scenes, the accreditation, the quality assurance, the platforms, you know, all of that has to be there. But at the end of the day, whether they're workers in companies or in governments or civil society or in SMEs, it should be very easy for them to actually get upskilled in the first instance. And there should be then a pathway, you know, to the next step and the next step for you know, for development. Because the whole idea is to give resilience to anyone who wants it and who wants to be upskilled. And this has been a big feature of Irish industrial policy, but also European. Labour market resilience and mobility is key during times of structural change and challenges. And the key thing is that it reaches down to anyone who wants to get involved. So hopefully somebody like you, you know, with just a laptop or with your computer will get some free initial training from the different hubs. And then it'll be obvious what the next step is. Then if you're kind of wanting a degree or wanting a vocational cert, or you want to maybe apply for a job in that area and say that actually you've done a bit of upskilling in these particular competencies. So I think that's the aim, that it should be accessible and open to everyone across the world who wants to explore this. So it's part of what we call the Open Education Resource Recommendation of UNESCO, the Open Science Recommendation, but also asking the Academy and VET and governments of the North to actually take really seriously the idea of building capacity in the global south, because there's no point us doing all this transformation and the global south not doing it, because then the planet's gone, the food systems are gone, the ocean is gone. So we have to really take seriously the idea of doing this as one humanity, basically, and take that responsibility. So hopefully it'll be very easy for you to actually take the first steps. So even on edX, that cert is basically free to go and do the master's pathway, and just to do that as the first step. That's a course with Sachs and Rockstrom and on metrics for sustainable development. And then that opens opportunities. At the moment, it's just to Sunway in Dublin, but next year we'll have the University of West Indies, University of Dar es Salaam, Chinese University of Hong Kong. So people are getting on board the idea that we should be offering, you know, cheap, accessible upskilling to everyone. I don't know, have others a comment on that from your perspective? So I'm doing it from the academic perspective, but maybe there's an answer from the corporate or UN perspective. Go ahead, Melissa. I think you're going to talk.
Yeah, I can make just a quick comment. One of the principles that we've applied in the content that's been developed for the actuarial profession that I referenced earlier is that it never sits behind a login wall. It is sitting on our public websites and pages for anyone to access. Of course, it's tailored specifically to actuaries, so it may not be such interesting reading for non-actuaries, but it's not exclusively for the members of the UK profession, and can be enjoyed also by the actuarial professions who sit in smaller or emerging markets who don't necessarily have the same capacity to be able to produce similar content as well. So I think that speaks to the question as well.
So unfortunately, I'm going to end it now because we're all moving on to different sessions. But so again, this was a side event, a virtual side event of the Summit of the Future, organised with University College Dublin, who is an SDG champion from the Government of Ireland, and we were doing this as part of SDG Week both in Ireland and Europe. So we're happy to do that, and we're also very happy to have everyone on the call, and lots of people registered that we'll send the recording to, but we'll also put the links up in the different stakeholders and in SDG Week, so the recording will be available. So to those future generations who are going to be watching this recording, we're happy that you're watching and that you've taken this on board, and please contact us as well. And again, finally, I'd like to thank Helen and the SDG Academy team for kind of promoting and running all of this as well. And we look forward to seeing you the next time. So if you want to join the SDG Academy, in a few hours, we'll be on UN Web TV casting a side event on peace, not war. We're going to look at the case studies of Ireland and Colombia and how the UN Security Council peacekeepers were a very positive impact on those peace processes as case studies, because we want to look at positive things. These are, you know, pathways to peace. And there's going to be interesting interventions on youth, women, education, technology, and related material around that as well. So you're very welcome to find us in a couple of hours on UN Web TV and just search for side event Peace Not War. And we'll come back to education and capacity building in that regard as well. Okay, so hopefully in a couple of hours, or we'll see you on the recording, or we'll see you next time. And of course, I have to thank all the speakers who came and who really excellent preparations and conversations. And hopefully we got across the idea that professional bodies and governments and academia and the vets and everyone's doing training courses, why not do them together and cross-fertilize them and certify them all together and actually really empower basically individuals in the labor force to do something more later. Okay, so we'll talk soon. Bye everyone. If I'm muted you so you can't say goodbye, well maybe you can throw up a love heart or something, and we'll see you soon.